It's the summer of 1941, deep in the skies above the Western Front. The sound of engines fills the air, the thunderous roar of aircraft cutting through the thick clouds as war rages beneath. The sun casts a harsh glow over the battlefield, but up here the fight is relentless. In a small cockpit, a lone pilot tightens his grip on the controls. His mission? To take on the might of Nazi air superiority. The odds are stacked against him. The Luftwaffe reigns over the skies, its fighters dominating every corner of Europe. But this pilot, one of the underdogs of the RAF, is about to show the world that victory in the skies isn't always about the numbers. Sometimes it's about skill, cunning, and a willingness to push the limits. The calm before the storm is broken as his target emerges, a massive formation of German bombers, their engines humming like an approaching storm. With a steady breath, he takes his first shot. A new chapter in aerial warfare is about to begin. The year is 1941. The world is entrenched in a devastating global conflict, and the skies above Europe have become a battleground in the war for air superiority. The German Luftwaffe, under the command of Reichsmarschall Hermann Göring, has established an iron grip over the skies. Their bombers and fighter planes dominate the airspace, unchallenged and ruthless in their pursuit of destruction. But in Britain, a different story is unfolding. In the desperate days following the fall of France, the Royal Air Force, RAF, is tasked with the impossible: to protect their homeland from the relentless onslaught of the German air forces. The Battle of Britain, fought from July to October 1940, had proven to be a decisive moment for the RAF. While the Luftwaffe made its best attempt to crush Britain into submission, the British pilots fought back with incredible bravery, inflicting heavy losses on the enemy. It was a victory that came at a high cost, but the British had shown that the skies were not to be surrendered easily. However, despite the RAF's success, the Luftwaffe's air superiority was far from broken. The Germans had an extensive and well-coordinated air force, with powerful aircraft like the Messerschmitt Bf-120 and the Junkers Ju-87 Stuka, designed for precision attacks and long-range raids. The Royal Air Force, on the other hand, was still reeling from the heavy toll of the Battle of Britain. Their Spitfires and Hurricanes, though legendary, were often outnumbered, and the RAF's resources were limited. As the war drags on into 1941, Germany's attention turns toward Operation Barbarossa, the invasion of the Soviet Union. Yet, their Luftwaffe is still entrenched in Europe, involved in a strategic bombing campaign against the Soviet Union, but also continuing its efforts in the Mediterranean and Africa. In North Africa, the Luftwaffe faces stiff resistance from the RAF, who have been positioned to defend British colonies and hold back the Axis forces. It is here, in the distant skies over the deserts of Egypt and Libya, that the story of one remarkable pilot begins to unfold. This pilot, flying a Hawker Hurricane, had seen the struggles and sacrifices of his comrades in previous engagements. He had learned the hard way that raw power in numbers was often not enough to win a battle. The sheer ferocity and discipline of the Luftwaffe had been a wake-up call for the Allies. They had to find a way to outsmart the enemy. And that's where this particular RAF pilot, though unassuming in appearance, would emerge with a tactical brilliance that would turn the tide in a way no one expected. By 1941, the tide of the war in North Africa was growing ever more critical. The Axis forces, under the command of General Erwin Rommel, were advancing relentlessly across the desert, threatening British supply lines and strategic positions. The RAF, stretched thin across multiple theatres, faced a daunting challenge. Their efforts to stem the German air offensive in Africa were hindered by the Luftwaffe's superior numbers, technological advancements, and battle-hardened pilots. The pivotal battle for control of the skies in North Africa would unfold over the deserts of Libya and Egypt. As British and Axis forces clashed on the ground, the air above became a vital battleground. The Luftwaffe's tactics were ruthless, hitting supply lines, destroying airfields, and maintaining constant pressure on RAF forces. Yet, the RAF had one asset that gave them an edge: a cadre of pilots determined to defy the odds. These men, many of whom had flown in the Battle of Britain, had learned how to survive in a war where innovation and adaptability were crucial. Among them was Flight Lieutenant Johnny Johnson, a relatively unassuming figure who would soon make his name known not just in the history books but also in the minds of the Luftwaffe pilots he would soon encounter. Johnny was an experienced pilot, known for his calm under pressure and sharp strategic mind. But more than that, he possessed a keen understanding of the enemy's tactics. He had spent enough time in combat to recognize the flaws in the Luftwaffe's superiority, its reliance on numerical advantage and predictable formations. The Luftwaffe, though technologically advanced and led by experienced commanders, was starting to show signs of vulnerability. Overconfidence had begun to creep into their strategy. Despite their dominance in the air, they still faced formidable opposition. The RAF pilots, knowing that they could not match the Luftwaffe in raw firepower, began to adopt new tactics. This shift would give birth to a style of combat that would soon be demonstrated by Johnny Johnson, a mix of cunning, unpredictability, and aggressive counterattacks. In early 1941, Johnson was assigned to a squadron based in the desert, tasked with taking on the Luftwaffe's seemingly invincible bombers and their fighter escorts. The squadron was poorly equipped with fewer aircraft than the enemy, and in desperate need of fresh leadership and innovative tactics. Johnson, with his keen understanding of aerial combat, was poised to deliver just that. He realized that while the Luftwaffe excelled in head-on attacks and rigid formations, they were vulnerable to swift, unpredictable strikes. If he could find a way to exploit these weaknesses, the tide of the war in the skies might just shift. As the Luftwaffe continued to dominate the skies, Johnson's tactics would be the key to breaking their stranglehold. It was not just about being a better pilot. It was about understanding the enemy, anticipating their moves, and adapting to their weaknesses. In the coming months, Johnson would go on to disrupt the Luftwaffe's air superiority with a series of brilliant strikes that would resonate through the history of aerial combat. The story of Flight Lieutenant Johnny Johnson and his tactical brilliance is multifaceted, offering several angles to explore. These perspectives offer a deeper understanding of not only the man himself, but the broader implications of his actions on the battlefield and the larger scope of air warfare during World War II. Johnny Johnson was not a man who sought the spotlight. His leadership was quiet yet profound, rooted in a deep sense of duty and an innate understanding of the psychological toll war took on men. In an environment where combatants often became numbers, Johnson's humanity remained intact. He understood that each mission was not just a tactical maneuver, but a test of endurance, both physical and mental. The men under his command faced a daily battle not only against the Luftwaffe but against the searing heat of the desert, the threat of mechanical failure, and the constant fear of death. His ability to relate to his comrades, to keep them focused and calm under pressure, played a pivotal role in the success of his tactics. In one such mission, after a prolonged engagement where his squadron was almost out of ammunition, Johnson demonstrated resilience, not just in his actions, but in his ability to keep morale high. His unwavering calm in the cockpit during stressful encounters inspired those around him. It was this resolve, this human touch, that allowed him to lead effectively in a world where soldiers were often expected to be mere cogs in the machine of war. Tactically, Johnson's approach to aerial combat was a breath of fresh air in a world where tradition often dictated that a head-on assault was the only way to win. In stark contrast to the predictable formations of the Luftwaffe, which adhered strictly to defensive patterns, Johnson taught his men to think differently. He employed what would become known as hit-and-run tactics, launching fast, aggressive strikes against enemy bombers from unexpected angles, using the terrain and the chaotic nature of the desert to their advantage. The crucial aspect of his strategy was unpredictability. By abandoning the standard, expected formations, he caused confusion among German fighter escorts, who found it difficult to defend their bombers from such sudden and erratic attacks. His pilots, who were often outnumbered, were able to land precise blows and retreat before the Luftwaffe could regroup. This was a stark departure from conventional air combat, where overwhelming force was often seen as the only means to achieve success. Johnson's method of using limited resources to their fullest potential marked a significant shift in tactical thinking. While Johnson's brilliance in the cockpit played a critical role in the success of his squadron, the aircraft he flew, the Hawker Hurricane, was an equally important component of his success. The Hurricane, though a capable fighter, was far from the cutting-edge aircraft of the time. While the Spitfire had received much of the glory for its speed and agility, the Hurricane was seen as the workhorse of the RAF. With its slower speeds and slightly outdated design, yet, in the hands of skilled pilots like Johnson, the Hurricane proved to be a formidable weapon. Its robustness and ability to take punishment while still performing well in combat made it ideal for the hit-and-run tactics Johnson favored. Though slower than the Luftwaffe's advanced fighters, such as the Bf-109, the Hurricane had an advantage in endurance and reliability, vital qualities when engaging in long, grueling missions over the North African desert. Johnson's success came not from superior technology but from his ability to push the limits of what his aircraft could do. He used its strengths, stability, durability, and firepower to his advantage, compensating for its lack of speed with superior flying skills and battlefield awareness. In a sense, Johnson's story is not just one of tactical brilliance, but also a testament to the ingenuity of pilots who made the most of the tools they had, even if they weren't the latest and greatest on the battlefield. Johnson's leadership went beyond simply issuing orders. He embodied the qualities of a leader that his men could rely on. In the midst of war, where uncertainty and fear are constant companions, Johnson's ability to make quick decisions under extreme pressure was what separated him from many others. His leadership style was grounded in trust. He believed in the autonomy of his pilots, allowing them to take initiative in battle while guiding them with a steady hand. Unlike many other leaders, he did not command from the back, but took part in the combat, facing the same risks as the men under him. His presence in the cockpit, often in the thick of the fight, served as a constant reminder of his commitment to the cause. The psychological impact of having a leader who was not only capable but actively involved in combat cannot be overstated. In his squadron, Johnson fostered an environment of mutual respect, where every pilot knew that their lives were valued and their input was taken seriously. This was crucial in a time when the weight of war often crushed morale. When Johnson's squadron went into battle, they did so with the knowledge that their leader trusted them, which in turn made them more confident in their own abilities. The human connection within the squadron helped to build an unspoken bond, turning a group of men into a cohesive unit capable of achieving what seemed impossible. From the perspective of the Luftwaffe, Johnny Johnson's rise to prominence was a frustrating development. The German Air Force, regarded as one of the most formidable in the world at the time, had grown accustomed to its dominance over the skies. Their pilots were highly trained, their aircraft superior in many respects, and their strategies well established. The thought of an RAF squadron managing to challenge that dominance, let alone succeed in combating their advanced formations, was almost unthinkable to them. The Luftwaffe's overconfidence in their superior air capabilities was a critical flaw. This overconfidence often led to predictable patterns, which Johnson would exploit time and again. The German pilots were often accustomed to overwhelming their foes with superior numbers, but Johnson's unorthodox approach caught them off guard. In many encounters, the Luftwaffe's reliance on their tried and tested tactics backfired, as Johnson's squadron would evade their well-formed defenses and strike from unexpected directions. The Germans, who were often confident in their air superiority, found themselves forced into defensive positions, unable to deal with the agility and unpredictability of Johnson's attacks. Furthermore, the Luftwaffe's heavy reliance on large formations and bombers made them vulnerable to fast, nimble fighters like the Hurricane, which could dart in and out of attacks. This vulnerability became increasingly apparent as Johnson's tactics grew more effective, and the Luftwaffe began to realize that their traditional approach to air superiority might not be as infallible as they had once thought. While Johnny Johnson's story is one of tactical brilliance and military success, it also speaks to the greater moral complexities of war. Every victory, every battle, and every pilot lost comes with a personal cost, one that is often measured in human lives rather than strategic points or territory gained. For Johnson and his men, the pressure was constant. Every mission carried the risk of not only failure but death. Many of the young pilots under his command would never return home. War, even in its moments of triumph, never offers true victory without sacrifice. Yet Johnson's ability to navigate the moral complexities of his role as a leader, balancing the need for success with the duty to protect his men, was part of what made him a standout figure. In moments of deep reflection, Johnson himself would later speak about the heavy burden of leading men into battle, knowing that the outcome was uncertain and many would not make it back. The moral weight of his decisions, the constant need to assess risks, and the emotional toll of watching comrades fall were elements that were never far from his thoughts. Johnson's story reminds us that even the greatest military successes are tinged with the sorrow of loss, making his achievements not only a triumph of tactics but a testament to the resilience of the human spirit in the face of overwhelming odds. The summer of 1941 would prove to be a pivotal moment in the struggle for air supremacy. The war in North Africa was at a critical juncture, and both sides knew that whoever controlled the skies would have the upper hand in the ground conflict that followed. For the RAF, it was a battle for survival. For the Luftwaffe, it was about maintaining the momentum of their relentless march across Europe and Africa. By now, Johnny Johnson's unorthodox tactics were starting to make waves. His squadron's hit-and-run approach was proving highly effective in disrupting the Luftwaffe's bombing runs and reducing their effectiveness. But the Germans were no fools. They understood the growing threat and began to take countermeasures. They launched larger formations and increased patrols, hoping to pin down the RAF pilots and crush them with superior numbers. Johnson's squadron found itself facing a new kind of challenge. The Luftwaffe, aware of the RAF's growing tactical advantage, began deploying new strategies to neutralize them. It was in the heat of these intense confrontations that Johnson's greatest moment of leadership and ingenuity would unfold. On a scorching August day in 1941, Johnson and his squadron were assigned to intercept a large Luftwaffe bombing formation, escorted by their feared Bf-109s. The odds were heavily against the RAF pilots, outnumbered with fewer fighters and less fuel. As Johnson led his men toward the target, the Luftwaffe seemed to have the upper hand, but it was at this critical moment that Johnson executed a maneuver that would define his career. Instead of charging directly into the formation, he ordered his men to split up, creating chaos in the Luftwaffe's ranks. Johnson's aircraft, along with a handful of his best pilots, dove straight into the heart of the enemy formation, targeting the bombers' weak points and executing tight turns to avoid the more heavily armed escorts. With no time to organize a counterattack, the Luftwaffe bombers were taken by surprise. The precision of the attack was unparalleled. Johnson's squadron swooped down like hawks, attacking the bombers from unexpected angles, causing devastating damage. The Luftwaffe's fighters attempted to rally, but Johnson's fast, unpredictable strikes made them hesitate, and their formations began to break apart. It was chaos in the skies. The Luftwaffe, once so confident in its air superiority, was suddenly on the back foot. This moment marked the turning point. The Luftwaffe's response was swift, but it was clear that Johnson's tactics had thrown them into disarray. The losses on both sides were heavy, but the psychological impact on the Luftwaffe was profound. For the first time, they had been caught off guard, their air superiority challenged in a way that no one had expected. Johnson had not just outflown the enemy, he had shattered their confidence. The Battle of North Africa was far from over, but the RAF had taken a significant step toward breaking the Luftwaffe's hold on the skies. The aftermath of that August encounter would reverberate across the battlefield. While the Luftwaffe would not admit defeat easily, the consequences of Johnson's attack were undeniable. In the days that followed, Luftwaffe commanders began to reassess their tactics, recognizing that their once overwhelming air superiority in North Africa had been significantly challenged by the RAF's audacity and cunning. For Johnson's squadron, the victory was a turning point, a validation of their unconventional methods. Johnson himself, though humble about his role, would later reflect on that day as one of the most intense and rewarding of his career. But for the Luftwaffe, this was more than a loss of aircraft. It was a loss of morale. The once formidable reputation of the German Air Force had been fractured, and the realization that they could be outsmarted and outmaneuvered in the air began to sink in. The cracks in their armor, once imperceptible, were now visible to all. As the war in the skies over North Africa continued, Johnson's tactics would go on to inspire not only his fellow RAF pilots, but also a broader shift in the approach to air combat. No longer was it about sheer numbers or brute force. It was about using speed, surprise, and innovation to gain the upper hand. Johnson's ability to read the battlefield and adjust his tactics on the fly became a model for others to emulate. For the Luftwaffe, however, the consequences were far-reaching. The German Air Force, accustomed to dominating the skies, had underestimated the resolve of the RAF and the ingenuity of pilots like Johnny Johnson. In the months that followed, as the RAF adapted and refined its tactics, the Luftwaffe would struggle to maintain its grip on air superiority in North Africa. Johnson's tactical genius had become a symbol of the larger shift in the balance of power, not just in the air, but in the war itself. As the sun set on that fateful day in August 1941, the battlefield was littered with wreckage, and the sky was still thick with the smoke of battle. But for Johnny Johnson and the RAF, the victory was far more than just a tactical success. It was a reaffirmation of the idea that war, even in its most desperate moments, could be won with intellect and courage. The sky, once dominated by the Luftwaffe, now seemed a little less certain. The consequences of Johnson's tactical brilliance began to unfold swiftly in the aftermath of that fateful day. The RAF, though still outnumbered and under-resourced, found themselves with a renewed sense of purpose. The Luftwaffe's sudden vulnerability in North Africa had forced them into a reactive stance. Their initial overconfidence had been shattered, and the effect was not only seen in the immediate losses suffered by the Luftwaffe, but also in the subsequent shifts in strategy and psychology that rippled through both sides. The loss of bombers and aircraft, coupled with the disruption in their formations, sent shockwaves through the German command structure. The Luftwaffe, despite their advanced technology and tactical expertise, had been caught in a situation they hadn't fully prepared for. The RAF's success, led by Johnny Johnson, had not only taken a toll on the Luftwaffe's material strength, but also severely dented their morale. The realization that their dominance in the skies was no longer a given marked a turning point. As a result, the Germans were forced to adjust their operations and adopt more cautious strategies, particularly in North Africa. For Johnson and his squadron, the victory was bittersweet. The toll of combat had been heavy. Several of their fellow pilots had paid the ultimate price in the battle, and every victory came at a cost. The psychological impact on the men was substantial. War was relentless, and the struggle for survival was never far from their minds. But there was also a sense of pride, knowing that their innovative tactics had led to a significant shift in the war's dynamics. In the wake of the battle, Johnson would go on to receive recognition, not just for his aerial victories, but for his ability to think beyond conventional strategies. His success in disrupting the Luftwaffe's dominance had far-reaching implications. The RAF's success was not a simple case of luck, but a demonstration of how intelligence, innovation, and the courage to challenge the status quo could bring about real change on the battlefield. On the other side, the Luftwaffe had suffered a blow to their sense of invincibility. While they would continue to dominate other theaters of the war, the skies over North Africa were now contested. The RAF's ability to exploit the weaknesses in German formations meant that air superiority, once seemingly a foregone conclusion for the Nazis, was no longer a certainty. As the months passed, the Luftwaffe found themselves increasingly bogged down in a war of attrition, their previously unchallenged supremacy slipping from their grasp. The immediate effects of Johnson's victory in the skies above North Africa were felt not only in the air, but also on the ground. As the Luftwaffe's bombing capabilities diminished and their fighter escorts became more cautious, the German army's ground operations began to slow. With the RAF successfully harassing and disabling Luftwaffe aircraft, the Axis forces found themselves unable to maintain the same level of logistical support from the air, which directly impacted Rommel's operations. The lack of air dominance meant that the Allies could now better protect their supply lines, vital to sustaining their efforts in North Africa. Johnson's brilliant tactics also had a profound impact on the larger course of the war. The shift in air superiority in North Africa marked a significant moment in the Allied effort to halt the Axis advance. This victory, though part of a broader campaign, was a crucial step towards the eventual defeat of German forces in the region. As the Luftwaffe struggled to regain control, British and Commonwealth forces began to push back, culminating in the decisive defeat of the Afrika Korps at the Battle of El Alamein in late 1942. The battle, although not entirely dependent on Johnson's air tactics, was certainly influenced by the shifting balance of power in the skies. In the broader context of World War II, this victory served as a reminder that air superiority was not an absolute certainty, even for the most technologically advanced military forces. It was a victory that demonstrated how crucial adaptability and tactical innovation were in modern warfare. Johnson's success was a testament to the importance of learning from the enemy, thinking outside the box, and acting decisively when the opportunity arose. The Luftwaffe's struggle to regain control was a microcosm of the broader war effort. The defeat in North Africa, though not catastrophic in terms of aircraft losses alone, had psychological consequences. The Germans had been made aware that their supremacy in the air could be contested, something that they had previously believed impossible. The impact was felt not just in the air campaigns, but in the broader German military strategy, which had to account for the unforeseen vulnerability of their air force. For Johnson, the aftermath was one of mixed emotions. The battle had been won, but the cost of war was ever present. His squadron had suffered losses, and the pressure of leadership weighed heavily. Yet, his tactical innovation had demonstrated that success in battle was not merely a matter of strength or numbers, but a product of clever thinking and resolve in the face of overwhelming odds. He had proven that sometimes a well-executed, unpredictable move could defeat the might of an empire. Though the war would continue for several more years, the consequences of that day in August 1941 would echo through the Allied and Axis air forces for the remainder of the conflict. The Luftwaffe, shaken but not broken, would continue its operations, but the RAF's newfound confidence was undeniable. Johnny Johnson's brilliance in the cockpit had disrupted the Axis plan for air dominance, and the ripples of that disruption were felt across the Mediterranean and beyond. The battle for control of the skies in North Africa was not just a military confrontation. It was a defining moment that reshaped the course of World War II. The courage, ingenuity, and sheer resilience displayed by Johnny Johnson and his squadron became a symbol of the power of adaptability in warfare. In a conflict where brute force and overwhelming numbers often seem to determine victory, Johnson's victory showed that intelligence, unpredictability, and leadership could change the outcome of a battle. The psychological impact of this event was profound. For the Luftwaffe, who had long considered their air superiority unassailable, the reality of their vulnerability came as a harsh reminder of the unpredictable nature of war. For the Allies, it was a reminder that victory could be achieved not just by matching the enemy's strength, but by outsmarting them. The RAF's success in North Africa would serve as a precursor to the larger strategic shifts that would follow, including the eventual Allied victory in Europe. In a broader sense, Johnny Johnson's story is a testament to the human spirit's ability to adapt, learn, and persevere even in the face of overwhelming odds. His tactical brilliance, rooted in an understanding of the enemy and an ability to push the boundaries of conventional warfare, left a lasting legacy in military history. It was not just about flying the plane or pulling the trigger. It was about understanding the larger picture, making bold decisions, and trusting in the value of teamwork and innovation. The skies over North Africa may have been turbulent, but they also became the proving ground for new ways of thinking in aerial combat. Johnny Johnson's tactical approach, grounded in innovation and leadership, left an indelible mark not only on the war, but on the way future generations would approach the complexities of warfare. As the war continued to unfold, it would be the lessons learned in these early moments, lessons of resilience, intelligence, and courage, that would guide the Allies to ultimate victory. In the end, the battle for air supremacy was not just about who had the superior aircraft or the greatest numbers. It was about who could adapt, who could learn from each engagement, and who could turn the tide with brilliance and courage in the most unexpected moments. Johnny Johnson, with his keen mind and unyielding spirit, proved that even against the most daunting challenges, victory could be achieved with the right combination of skill, leadership, and innovation.